So now we'll deal with one more thing, and that is handling room tone fills. And I'm just going to zoom in here to page in the ambulance. And you can see that there's a little gap in the interview there. I'll play it back.
In the house, because I would have them on everyone and everything. For me, it's always just been a fascination. It's always been something that I've been interested in. So I definitely think that's where it started.
Now, we had a couple of gaps in Dave and Paige before, but they were in the living room and it was very, very quiet. So not really a huge problem for room tone. Certainly not so much as this. So I'll just play that back again.
In the house, because I would have them on everyone and everything.
You definitely hear it drop out. And this is where, fortunately, the picture editor has already provided a chunk of room tone. You as a dialogue editor want to get in touch with your location production crew, and you want to verify that you've got raw materials for the room tones from the different spaces that you recorded in. So I'm just going to have a look at this. I've brought those room tone tracks up underneath page, and this is exactly where it was positioned. So it looks like the picture editor was trying to fill the gap in, and I'm just going to play it back now with a chunk of room tone. Notice that since I'm only playing one track of page, I will only play one track of room tone. In theory, if they were careful, then the room tone here should be from the same microphone as the interview here, and the room tone there should be from the same microphone as the room tone, or as the interview there. That's where this kind of organization on set really becomes important. So I'm just going to play this back and see what it sounds like running through this now.
And everything.
I'll play it back from a
Didn't
little
keep a
further.
box of Band-Aids in the house, because I would have them on everyone and everything. For me, it's always just been a fact.
No, it's not bad.
Didn't keep a box of Band-Aids in the house, because I would have them on everyone and everything.
Certainly does help a lot. Now, if I listen closely, I can maybe even hear that there's a bit of a drop there. So I need now to do my crossfades, my overlaps. I'll just blow up the waveform height here. And the first question I'll ask is if I can make this last a little longer. Looks like maybe there's some new words coming in. Let's find out.
Everyone and everything, so.
Yeah, she goes so, and there's a little crackle there. She's moving her hands. So I really can't afford to make that last much longer. Bring this room tone in, perhaps a frame earlier, just so that the fades overlap. So I'm just going to try bringing that back. Yeah, there's a little more room tone there. I'll do my fade, and incidentally, double click and hit F again, and that will default it to the new shape. And let's just see how that sounds.
On everyone and everything.
That's a little smoother. Same deal here. Try to extend it outwards if I can. Double clicking to select, and then command nudge. Yep, looks pretty good for about 3 frames. Little fade on that. Just hit the letter F again to get the default fade. Let's see how this sounds.
Have them on everyone and everything. For me, it's
And it's pretty subtle in the microphone, I'm sure, for you, but I can definitely hear a little bump there on the room tone.
thing.
So I should do a fade on that as well.
Thing.
That's okay.
Thing. For me, it's
Much
thing.
better. So that's nice and smooth. So there's my room tone fill. Then they've done another one here. The editors added another one here at the end, and that is because they had to come out a little sooner before we cut to the next interview. So I'm going to just temporarily play this into this without the room tone. So I've muted the room tone. Let's hear what the gap sounds like.
Started or where it came from for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic.
Started or where it came from for sure.
And that's not really so nice, hearing that room tone drop so quickly. This is what we're trying to avoid, sort of sudden changes in sound. So once again, the first thing I'll do is experiment with the fade that came out of Avid. Remember, this fade came out of Avid. And I'm just going to stretch that a little bit and see what comes. Now, in this case, maybe it just stays on that noisy room tone. Maybe I don't need this. Let's find out. Let's see what I got with that.
Where it started or where it came from for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic.
That's better. That's not bad without the added room tone. So I'm using my control key to nudge the length of that. Since it's such a noisy sound, this is a situation where maybe a more gradual shift from this to this, from this to this might be better. So let's hear what that sounds like now.
It came from for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic for...
Not bad. And something tells me there's going to be a bit of B-roll audio under that shot.
Yeah, I've been a...
That might be a fairly noisy shot with a bit of clattering. How do I check that? Well, just go down and have a look at the B-roll audio and see if there's anything in there. I'll unhide them.
It came from for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic for.
Doesn't look like
It
it.
came from for.
Doesn't look like any B-roll audio.
It came from for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic for 20.
It came from for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic.
So with no B-roll audio in there to count on, we have to just make sure that this transition sounds as smooth as possible. It's already sounding pretty good. I might just change that to a curve. Try it
From
once
for
more.
sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic.
From
That's
for
not
sure.
bad.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic for.
Now remember, this is sounding a little more echoey, but this was Paige and Dave on the couch. And so the tonal quality is different than when we had Dave sitting in his living room there. So let's just have a look at that. Little look at that sound. So this was Paige and Dave on
20
the
years.
couch.
Which has been a long time because when I initially.
Sounds quite off axis, doesn't it?
From for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic for 20 years, which has been a long time.
It also doesn't register as loud as I would like it to.
From for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic for 20 years, which.
So I'll probably bring that up a little bit, maybe 3 or 4 dB.
From for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic for 20 years, which has been a long time because when I initially.
That's better.
From for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic for 20 years.
I'll bring the other one up by the same amount, about 4 dB. And then I'm just going to listen. So I'm assuming this is lav, if it was lav on 1 and boom on 2, but I really don't know. So there's only one way to find out, and I'll listen to the other mic.
From for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic for 20 years, which has been a long time because when I initially started.
From for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic for 20 years, which has been a long time because.
They sound very similar, but I'm kind of liking the second one better.
From for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic for 20 years, which has been a long time because when I initially started out in the career, I thought I.
So something tells me that's the lav down there. It's a little stronger and clearer, so I'm just going to leave it there. I'll be using that one.
From for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic for 20 years, which has been a long time because when I initially started.
All right. And then I've made my choice on that, and that's pretty good. The yeah,
From
I've
for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic for.
gets pretty hot.
From for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic for 20 years.
So this is where you also might experiment with blading. Notice whenever I blade, I'm trying to find spots that are near the beginnings of words. So that's a good spot to blade. It's a better spot than that, for example, or that. This is a good spot to blade, because what happens is the word itself distracts us from the change in the volume. It's going to be the room tone that you hear jump. So by cutting right at the start of a word, the word itself tends to mask the change, hide the change. So I'll blade that, and I'll just try bringing the first one down, maybe a couple of dB, maybe 2.5 dB. Let's see how that reads now.
Came from for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic for 20 years, which has been a long time because.
I heard it jump in volume there after the blade. You can definitely hear a room tone jump. So I might spend a little more time with this, maybe something like this, maybe not going up quite so much. Something like this. Notice I'm doing them both, even though, whoops, that wasn't quite right, was it? I gotta be careful. It was plus, wasn't it? There we go. So something like that, maybe even a little less. Something along those lines.
Years.
Came from for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic for 20 years.
No, definitely noticeable.
Came from for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic for 20 years, which has been a long time because when.
Came from for sure.
Yeah, I've been a paramedic for 20 years, which has been a long.
No, it's not so bad. So you just have to use your ears to sort of gauge what it is you want to do here, and if it sounds good to you, then it's probably good. It's at least a good place to start. There aren't rules specifically, and you can't always rely on the meters. If you stick to relying on the meters all the time, you'll have problems. Use your ears. In this case, I had told you don't micromanage, but it looks like there might be one loud moment in here. I don't know what that
In
is.
the career, I thought I would give myself maybe 5 years.
Well, that's not bad. Draw out the waveform height a
In
little
the
bit.
career, I thought I would give myself maybe 5 years.
It does jump a little bit in volume.
In the career, I thought I would give myself maybe 5 years.
But that's the
Well,
way
yeah, here
that's the ways people speak. So I really don't have a problem with that. So just again to repeat, just because I see this dropping in level and this rising in level, you cannot just instantly go, well, I need to change that. You do need to rely on your ears, and you do need to allow a bit of a dynamic range in the voice. We need some sonic interest in the voice. So those are some of the main aspects of the dialogue edit that you will be getting into and doing. If you cover your documentary with the majority of these steps, you will have done the majority of the dialogue edit. And we'll just take a look at some of the finer points during our edit reviews. So that's the nature of the dialogue edit. Fades, dealing with room tone fills, dealing with volume levels. And then before you are finished, and basically as you go, you should also be just keeping track of what sounds you want to keep and what sounds you want to get rid of or not use. So let's just review what we had done here. We decided to keep Dave's lav track, so I keep that throughout. And I mute Dave's boom track. Now, it's possible to accidentally unmute the track and then we move into the mixing stage and we're not really sure which mic you meant for us to keep. So if you've finally made the decision to keep Dave's lav, and once you've reached the end of all the editing in both tracks, even though you're only keeping the lav, then I would also recommend making the boom track inactive. And that just tells us when we get into the mix that you did not intend us to use the boom track. I would do the same with Page, make the track inactive. I think Page down here, again, we decided to make the lav, presumably the lav, the mic we use, so I'm going to make that inactive. Room tone, same deal. I think they were basically the same, weren't they, from one channel to the next? But when we did our evaluation of the room tone fill, we only sounded one room tone track, so I would also do the same on the mute. I would make it inactive. And then I'm just going to scroll ahead a bit here and notice in here, and if you remember, we had decided that this piece of room tone wasn't even needed because this chunk of the room tone in Page's line managed to sustain itself long enough to get into Dave's next line. So I don't actually need this piece of room tone. I can't deactivate the track because it's got other room tone in it. What I would do is just deactivate the clip, Command M. Leave it there. If you leave it there and we decide in the mix that we want to work with it, it's in place. If you delete it, then it's a nuisance for us to have to go and recover it. So try to avoid deleting things. And then when we get to Page and Dave sitting on the couch, which was actually Dave, we decided we liked the second track because it was actually called Boom, and I think it was the lav. That's the only clip in this particular documentary where this is sort of the case. So I'm going to just make an executive decision to reverse these. And then I'm going to rename them because I think this was actually the lav. I'll rename it lav. I just want to show you this. And it's going to say that I've already got that name used. It's because the next track is called that. It doesn't like two tracks with the same name. So I would just maybe make a slight modification. Page Dave 2 on the lav. And then Page Dave 2, the one we're not using, on the boom. Now you can see that they've been renamed. I swapped their positions, so I'm keeping the lav on top like I did with the others. What I think is a lav anyway. That's the one being soloed. That's the one that I liked. It seemed to be a little closer to his voice. So this one I would make inactive. We didn't really work with Cass here, but I would do the same thing. We'll make an assumption that we don't want her. And then this was Paige and Dave, I think, together on the couch. So we'll make an assumption for now, just for the sake of this tutorial, that we want that one to be inactive. There we go. I'm going to change the track height to small here, and I just want to note now that what I've done is I've deactivated 1/2 of every interview's dialogue, and then I've also got the other one soloed. I'm going to ask you to take off solo buttons, so don't be using solo buttons just to let me hear stuff. There's a danger when you use a lot of solos, and that is that you can accidentally unsolo, and then suddenly the sound doesn't play, and it also means that you can have a problem with things being muted accidentally. So don't use solo or mute except as you work to isolate things. Once you're finished your work, take off the solos and mutes and use track deactivation to kill a track, or muting a clip. Command M to mute a particular clip, like I did with that chunk of room tone up here. Then one more thing just to point out, the room tone that I have worked with in this little example here today was in here. And this room tone pertained to page. What I'd rather not have you do is move the room tone up into the page track. So some of you might be tempted to do something like this. But I'd rather you don't. I'd rather you keep it in its own independent track next to Page and Dave, or the page track. And if you want to just dedicate one pair of tracks to all the room tone throughout, all the room tone fills throughout, you can. You're welcome to do that. We can work with that in the mix as long as the room tone is there. If you want to go further and actually have dedicated room tone tracks per character and per microphone, feel free. But that would give you a lot of extra tracks to work with. So I'd rather you don't do that. All right, and then in the mix, if we have to separate them into multiple tracks for mix reasons, we'll do so. But for now, this is not a bad idea. Keep the room tone separate. It just keeps it better organized when we move into the mix. Save your work. Notice all the dialogue tracks have names that are legitimate. Then the master fader, and then the B-roll audio, which we haven't worked with. We have not renamed the tracks. I'll ask you to stick with that rule as well. Don't name the track unless it's a track that is important in your session. And that's it. I'll see you next week.